Socrates' philosophies and hypotheses. What are your hypotheses of the darkness at Mount Smart Stadium? And do you think that Alex Paulson started it all?
Um, no, but I mean, I don't. Yeah, I can see how that would have played into Melbourne Victory's sort of mentality of going there and being like, yeah, we're the um. I won't say underdogs because I don't know Melbourne Victory ever feel like they're underdogs, but they definitely like they're going into that game saying we're away from home. Everyone here is there to support the other team. We've had to travel across the country, between countries to get here. We're 1-0 down. We were the lower ranked team in the regular season up against the minor prems here. They had a sort of not. It feels weird to say siege mentality when they went into the other team's home, so it's you're not really under siege there, but um, they did have a sort of I don't know, maybe a chip on their shoulder about the way
Ambush.
they yeah, this is like an ambush. They went out looking for an ambush there. They because I like the first 10, 15 minutes, well, the Victory were pretty excellent. And Auckland, I won't say they were rattled, but they definitely were facing something that I don't think they had to deal with in the first leg. Like they're under a level of pressure which they managed to withstand throughout or not just withstand, but just to prevent in the first leg away from home there. And they did withstand that, and they did come through that all right, and they settled into the game after that. And I'm thinking, well, that was maybe that was the blow that the Victory were there to throw, and they they handled it. They got into their game, settled things down, and then we'll see Auckland FC at some point grab a goal and take this one beyond. But that didn't happen. And I don't think the Victory would have been too bummed about being 0-0 at half time. They would have liked to have scored an early goal when they had their chance, but they also knew they were going to get an opportunity to reset and come out strong. So I think that would have happened regardless of Alex Paulson doing anything. And I almost wonder, like, when I'm trying to remember exactly what the thing was. It was like a foul on the edge of the box where their dude stayed down injured, but he was sort of the one that was making the tackle, but then he hurt himself or whatever. And so both teams sort of thought that they were the team being hard done by. Um, but Paulson did run over and sort of like, throw a few hands. Not balled fist hands, but he got up in there. Um, and I don't know. In that moment, I'm thinking this is a goalkeeper trying to rack his lads up. The Auckland were doing all right. I don't think they had that. They weren't on the wobbles at that point, but they also it didn't feel like they really created anything in the first half. It was a very even game, which was running the risk of letting their slight advantage slip away, which turns out to be exactly what happened. But even then, I don't. This is the reason I wanted to write about it after the game, but I've sort of found myself I have to because I got a bunch of other stuff that I normally write on Mondays and Tuesdays to get through. But also I felt the need to sit with it for a little bit because I actually struggled to formulate my ideas and how do I actually I know how I feel. I'm disappointed, but what do I actually think about this? Like, what are the ideas I can put on the page? And I think it just comes down to this was the type of team, the way that Auckland FC play through a lot of the season. They are the type of team that does run the risk of this type of result. And the fact that it didn't really happen to them through the regulars is a bit crazy, but they weren't blowing teams away, right? They weren't winning 5-0 very often. There is an element to that I'll come back to later if we talk about the absence of Max Mata, but certainly the way they started the season with a bunch of those wins, they were a lot of 1-0, 2-1 type victories. And this was in a very similar vein against a team that has a lot of postseason experience. And the Auckland FC had enough of that to where that shouldn't have been an issue for them. But of course, it's also not an advantage if the other team have the same amount and more so if you're talking about specifically in the A League. But I mean, ultimately, I think what I had to settle down to, and this podcast, it's going to fit nicely within the respect the darkness thing, because I think it was just one of those ones where like the darkness took over, and that game completely changed on a deflected shot from outside the box, which is not the kind of effort that Auckland FC are worried about. They know they can get in front of those ones and block them, but this one just happened to catch Nando Paineke's like the inside of his leg as he was crouching to block it, sent Alex Paulson in the wrong direction, couldn't get back across in time, sneaks inside the post. They then have sort of like a 5, 10, 15-minute period where I don't think they reacted well at all to the fact that they had been 1-0 up and then suddenly they're not. Suddenly they have to go out and do something else. Like they're no longer in control of this tie. It's 1-1 on aggregate, and if it ends this way, we're going to extra time. But also Melbourne Victory have a bit of momentum suddenly, and then they made the slip up, allowed Victory to score a second goal, and they just ran out of time from there. But they sort of got one back, but it didn't count because the ball had gone out. But and which I'm pretty sure the ball had gone out from, was it Guillermo Maya, I think, whipped the cross in for Logan Rogerson at the back post. I don't see how he could have hit it with that much curve, and Logan Rogerson winning that header 3 centimeters off the goal line for it not to have swerved out and come back in. But I also don't see a camera angle that proves it. So I think it's one of those ones where, like, you might have got a bit of in cricketing terms, like you might have got a bit of an umpire's call on the DRS there had it been given as a goal originally. You know what I mean? Like if they'd said pitched in line first and then the replay doesn't prove that it didn't pitch in line, well, you just got to go with the benefit of the doubt and the original call there. But the original call in this case was that it did go out. And it's just like a moment like that and the deflected goal, those kind of things, it doesn't take a lot to swing a playoff game because you got two excellent teams. There's not going to be a lot of goals between them, especially two very good defensive teams like these two. It doesn't take a lot to swing things when you get two sort of significant, just the spirits were not in your favor for those kind of moments. It's pretty hard to respond to. They might have snuck a goal at the end, but they didn't. And because they didn't, that's the end of their season. So it's a weird one to digest, but the way I've come out of it is, we'll say it again, like respect the darkness, because sometimes you just, sometimes it just wasn't written in the fates for you, right? Like Auckland FC were good enough to win that. They probably played well enough over the 180 minutes to win that, but then so did Victory. And when that's the case, it's like, well, someone's going to win and someone's going to lose, and the team who loses is going to feel like they didn't deserve it, but you're still going to lose. You're still going to wake up on Monday and you're out of the competition, and that's unfortunately what happened to Auckland FC.
Two quirky football observations. The instance where that there was like a foul situation, then Paulson rushed out to start a scrap. The Melbourne Victory player, like, he was injured.
Yeah.
And it looked like it could have been an Achilles, it could have been a lower calf strain. He didn't dive. He was injured. So why would you boo?
I think he got subbed off as well.
Exactly. Why would you boo a player who is injured? I didn't understand that. Another thing, and we mentioned it
the situation, yeah.
But last week, Logan Rogerson scores the winner in Melbourne, rushes over to the fans. The fans, like a security guard, gets in between the fans and Logan Rogerson. Made a bit of a joke about it. The Victory's second goal, there was a poor lady, hope she's okay. The security guard who was right in front of the Melbourne Victory fans, she is stuck in between a mob. A bunch of Melbourne Victory fans. A cluster, whatever you want to call it, a squad. And she's just getting like basically squeezed up against the railing. It was tough to watch, so I hope she's okay. Like, I did have a chuckle about it in the away league, but at some point you gotta, like, football fans, just chill out. I know it means a lot, but you don't need to rush past the security barriers. Like, you can just contain yourself. It is all right. And of course,
did you see the one in the NBL the other day in the Tuatara game where one of the imports for the Tuatara goes, like, it's not a security guard issue, but he like dives to get a loose ball, but then in basketball for some reason, well, the some reason is that Americans can sell them, which is why it happens, and then everyone else copies what America does. For some reason in basketball, they always have these seats so close. So there was like a kid, like a teenage boy sitting there. courtside, and it's courtside in New Zealand, so it's not a fancy seat. It's probably like a plastic seat, it's probably a barbecue chair or something. And this like, yeah, one of the import dudes for the Tuatara goes diving for a loose ball and basically like gives him a bit of Sonny Bill Williams, like flattens him, knocks him off the chair and whatever. He was all right. Like he got up and checked on him and everything, but it reminded me of that. Just like sometimes you can be in the wrong place at the wrong time at a sporting event.
Auckland FC, their success this season was all about being in the right place at the right time. They were always in the right place at the right time to get the second phase, to get the rebound, to get the mistimed kick. Any loose ball fell to Auckland FC. To me, that was most evident in the games against the Wellington Phoenix. Auckland FC, more experienced, more physical, faster, better instincts. They always won those balls. To be honest, that was the pattern throughout the whole season. I will get into the stats about Max Mata, but a lot of those, like the Mata influence comes from having a pure striker in the mixer. And when you keep putting the ball in the mixer from a long throw-in, from a corner kick, as Auckland FC do, you're going to be a bit more successful if you've got a pure striker like Max Mata on the pitch, but that doesn't cover the tactic of Auckland FC, which is just get the ball in the mixer and win the ball. None of that happened against Melbourne Victory. It was that's where you get into the dark forces, because yes, Melbourne Victory, they might have been sharper, whatever it is. They might have been fired up for revenge against Alex Paulson. But the ball just didn't fall to them. The ball was in the mixer so much in that second half as they were chasing the goal. Long throw-ins, corner kicks, long passes, goal kicks. And Auckland FC just like never got the ball. And when they did get the ball, it was going in the wrong direction. I think there was one instance where maybe Vestrada was facing the goal and Cam Howison came and took the ball away from him and away from the goal. All those little things that to me have been a staple of Auckland FC football this season didn't work against Melbourne Victory in that game. And it is a bummer, but I mean, what can you do? There was another little thing, the Fornaroli, his goal. Because the first goal, I mean, whatever. Deflection's a deflection. I think Paulson might have still been a bit hungover from the red mist of his scrap, because he didn't react at all to the deflection, but I'm not a goalie, so what do I know?
It's very hard when it goes through the defender's legs, though. I think you don't even see it till late, and he's seeing the shot going in the other direction. So yeah, when it happened live, I didn't realize it was as much of a deflection, and I'm thinking, you're right there, AP. Like he's probably, I don't know, I thought he should have got there, but I've cut him a lot more slack with the replays, because I think that's quite a hefty one as well. It's like a not just a hefty deflection, but it's like it's sneaking through the legs of Nando Peinecker, who's like the biggest body in front of you as well. So yeah,
and
tricky.
the deflections always generate more spin on the ball.
Yeah,
so then it curves more and stuff.
Which
like
I think. Yeah, I think that one sort of did. Like first, unless I'm remembering this wrong, like it sort of looks like it's skidding past and it sort of swerves into inside the post. Yeah.
But the second goal, Fornaroli, I don't know how to explain this, but if we're going towards the goal, the ball's left of the goal as I'm facing the goal, and the center striker is in the middle of the field. But as I'm looking at the two centre backs, the striker is on the right side of the left centre back. So that basically means the two centre backs are ball side of Fornaroli. The ball's on the left-hand side of the field, and the two centre backs are ball side of Fornaroli. That can't happen. In my football coaching textbook, that can't happen. And these are excellent centre backs. Zen Peinecker, Dan Hall. but somehow that little lapse in concentration, which was part of that swing and momentum you were talking about, decided the game. And I haven't had such a moment of clarity when I'm watching football defense, and like Fornaroli's not between the centre backs. It's not like Fornaroli's closer to the left back. He is in the middle of the pitch, and both centre backs are on his left.
I'm watching it again now as you say that, which is nice. I was getting the commentary in my ears and the vision in my eyes. But he actually starts on the right side. He starts outside Dan Hall and he drifts across to outside Nando Peineke, where the defense doesn't slide with him. You'd rather have him in between. So you got Hall, if the ball's coming from that side or whichever side, whoever's like sort of the blindside defender, the blindside flanker can go and play the ball, and then the open side guy can tuck in, and then you shut down like the through ball and the sort of direct option there. But it's brilliant movement from Fornaroli, but it's also a bit too static and a little bit too ball watchy from Auckland FC. And then above all of that, and I think maybe the reason that Peineke in particular doesn't really move is he's thinking, well, he's going behind me, he's offside. Which is what I thought watching it live as well. I was sitting there being like, well, that's not going to count. And they're going to come back on VAR. And he was a mile off. And then they show the side-on angle where Francis de Vries is a meter or two behind everyone else. And he's not offside. And it's actually just like more great movement, taking advantage of the ability to slide across that sort of the edge of the penalty area and keep the defense active. Like that's where a lot of teams get into that situation where they you have the ball in the attacking third and you just go sideways, try with this side, try that side, don't want to whip it across because that's too low percentage. We want to create something a bit clearer, but you don't actually commit the defenders. And if you don't commit the defenders, they're just in their element. If you do commit the defenders though, and sometimes that's nothing to do with where the ball is, that's just to do with where the striker or whoever is moving, like Fornaroli does here. Ask Nando Peineke, ask Dan Hall to make a decision, ask Francis de Vries to make a decision as well. And it only takes one of them to make the wrong decision for that to turn into a chance. And if you get a couple of them making the wrong decision, it's probably going to be a goal, which is kind of what happened here.
And these are players we've come to love this season. Franny de Vries, awesome, but he plays Fornaroli on side. Zen Peineke, Dan Hall, awesome, but they lose track of Fornaroli. Alex Paulson, awesome, the best goalkeeper in the A-League. But he decides to do the football equivalent of a James Fisher-Harris shoulder charge late in the game. An unhinged moment of brutality. Like, what are you doing? Sakai, awesome, but he's injured. So he doesn't finish the game. This is like, I don't know, it's like, yeah, Auckland FC didn't play well, but a lot of these things you gotta just throw it up to the dark forces and say like it wasn't meant to be for Auckland FC in that game, and especially playing without Max Mata. You've got a bunch of stats in our newsletter, and our newsletter comes out every Monday and Thursday evening via Substack, thenichecache.substack.com. You got a few stats with and without Max Mata. I think the most important thing here, 2.48 goals per 90 minutes with Max Mata on the field. That goes down to 1.49 without Max Mata. And 2 games without Max Mata in the finals against Melbourne Victory, Auckland FC scored 1 goal. There's a lot that went wrong for Auckland FC in that game. So I'm like, you got to respect the darkness. Even if Max Mata's playing, they could have lost that game just as easily because of the bad juju that was happening there at Mount Smart. That was cooking in the atmosphere. But Max Mata, he's a first 11 player for Auckland FC. We'll discuss a lot of the coming and goings, the signings, the transfers and stuff like that. But there's no guarantees Max Mata will be back at Auckland FC next season because I think he's on loan. So in all of this, Auckland FC being knocked out of the A-League finals, think we do need to respect the Kiwi Max Mata for his influence on winning football for Auckland FC and his absence in the finals. And I mean, and that's the other thing, like it was interesting in Melbourne because there were a lot more, the youngsters got more minutes. But then you can kind of see how that was holding Auckland FC back in the game at Mount Smart because, like, Jesse Randall tries hard, a lot of effort, a lot of fitness, a lot of speed, had that burst in the first half. He's a good footballer. I wouldn't say he's a classy A-League striker right now. And it was those kind of little moments that were like, I don't know if Randall's going to help us get a goal back. He's going to help us work hard, but he's not going to help us get a goal back to win the game. And Max Mata's absence created that hole, and it also restricted, I think, how good Auckland FC could be.
Yeah, and Liam Gillian coming off the bench was a similar thing. Callan Elliott coming off the bench is Callan Elliott more so because he's replacing Hiroki Sakai. I'm like, that's not a there's a little bit of an injury aspect to that, but that's regardless of why the substitution is made, that's not a substitution that makes your team more likely to score a goal, even though Elliott has that, traditionally a more attacking player than Sakai. He's also not as good as the guy who's been to like 3 or 4 World Cups and played in Champions League of Europe and Asia both. And even Marley Francois, starting on the left wing, I don't remember him doing a whole lot. And I don't know, but at the same time, like at the end there where they're trying to find goals, I'm watching thinking, Moreno's trying to do a little bit too much here. Guillermo Mai's trying to do way too much here, and part of that was like, they're trying to score a goal, and I'm watching Guillermo Mai running back to halfway to try to get the ball. It's like, you give your defenders some credit. They can advance the ball, get in the box. You're the striker here, but that's part of the thing of not having Max Mata. And Mai actually did an interview with the A-League website during the week where he talked about like the biggest thing that changed for him this season was when they started playing a more physical number 9 in front of him, because he doesn't actually see himself in that role. He sees himself as an attacking midfielder, and I think he looks more like a second striker type guy, which is still effectively what he was doing. But you can see how he views himself as an attacking midfielder by how much he likes to drop in and how he likes to get his touches and drifting around and getting involved a lot deeper. But that's not what you want when you're chasing a goal, when you to force extra time in a semi-final. You just need bodies in the box. Like you almost might have been more suited by just putting Tommy Smith on there and just saying, go stand by the last defender and win some flick-on headers. And you already explained kind of what the difference between having Mata there and not having Mata there is. Their best outlet through most of those, through the whole season was crosses, but especially in that game, it felt like those corner kicks. It's like they didn't, but they could score from these if the ball just drops right to someone. But part of getting the ball to drop right for someone is not just sitting there and waiting for it to drop right. It's like getting enough people out there to contest for it. And even just having someone like Mata near the goalkeeper. Plenty of goals this season have come from situations like that. He's not getting a goal for that. He's not getting an assist for that. But his presence is at least distracting. And it's either putting the keeper off and preventing him from being able to challenge for the ball, or it's drawing maybe one of their better aerial challengers away from someone else who might otherwise be marking Pinecker or Hall or whoever. So like there's just, and I mean, it just plays, having a player like that up front plays so much into the bullying aspect as well, which I won't say they went away from that in this second leg, but I will say Melbourne matched it. And I didn't know necessarily that Melbourne could match it. It definitely didn't match it in the first leg, but they did in the second leg. So, like, massive credit to Melbourne Victory for a performance like that. Because I think in a lot of ways they took what worked for them in little small patches in the home leg, and then limited a lot of the stuff that didn't work for them in that game. Came out there in the second match with a game plan that was adapted to the opponents that they were playing. And frankly, Auckland FC haven't faced that really this season. It's the first time they've played obviously, their first finals trips are the first time they've had to play the same team 2 games in a row. And there was probably a little bit of a tactical battle there that Steve Corica didn't win finally. And they're also just like the way they didn't react very well to conceding. They've scored a lot of they've had good comeback results for them. But the best of their start, and it's a lot of late goals, but the late goals aren't necessarily late equalizers. There was one or two of them. Most of those were late winners. It's like pushing on to try score on top of that, looking for a victory, being the proactive, aggressive team. Having to play from behind is not something they've done a lot of this season, and especially in the pressure of that kind of game where it's just like the clock's ticking faster than you can believe. And it just, I don't think they handled the occasion that well, frankly. I think once they got put under a little bit of pressure, they didn't wilt, but they weren't their dominant selves, certainly for long enough to allow the Victory to get a crucial second goal. But even after that, it just like it might have still worked. They might have still been able to just like whip the ball into the box often enough that something lands, or Nando Pinecker having a shot cleared off the line near the end. It could have happened, but I don't think they gave themselves the best chance there. And I think part of that was, in fact, let's be bold about it. I'll say they would have won this tie with Max Mata starting those games. In fact, he didn't even need to start the first game. They got what they needed out of the first game. If Max Mata plays that second leg, I think Auckland FC would have won that. But it was just one more thing, not having him, just one more of those things where it's like maybe this alone, although looking at the stats, I don't know that it is that alone. He only played a third of the minutes, but they scored nearly half their goals while he was on the pitch. So maybe there is actually a pretty significant thing there to say that he is one of their most influential players tactically. But, we'll cut some slack there for a guy who only played about 800 minutes this season, only played about a third of the season, and say like, it was one of several things where it's like, this might not be definitive on their own, but when they start to add up, they really do start to add up. And even then, it was only just like they were inches away from forcing extra time in that game. That's how close it was, but close wasn't close enough.
Can I quiz you on 3 other topics before we get into the Warriors and some rugby league? We've had news this morning that Kosta Barbarouses will depart the Wellington Phoenix. What do you reckon?
Well, I like it when these ones happen because everyone acts like it's the worst thing imaginable, and I get to sit back and be like, I don't know. I'm not so sure. I think there's an argument to say that the Phoenix could be better with a different type of striker there, the way they were trying to play last season. I actually think while he was, he was clearly the player of the season, he swept all the awards stuff. I thought there was a pretty extended spell through the middle of things as the season started to get away from them, where I don't actually think he was playing that well. I just don't think there was anyone else who was playing nearly as well as him over the full span of the season. He finished strong. He started brilliantly. There was a good chunk of like half the season in the middle there where he was doing a lot of things that weren't like the things that were this isn't him playing the way that he's been successful at for during this Phoenix stint. There's a lot of dropping in and trying to do little layoffs and stuff rather than being the guy who he's doing Guillermo Mais stuff rather than trying to do Bruno Fornaroli stuff, where be that guy who makes those clever movements in the attacking third and try to get on the end of crosses and drifting around the backs of of defenders to get out of their eyesight, ducking and weaving, smart stuff like he's made a whole career of, which he did get back to a bit more towards the end, partly as they got Chico Heraldez to be that guy who could be the sort of attacking creative pivot instead. Briefly, until he got injured. That was just the season that it was for the Wellington Phoenix. At least Auckland FC's darkness only had to face one game. The Phoenix had many moons of that. But yeah, I don't know that. I certainly don't look at a 35-year-old Kosta Barbarouses and think like this is an irreplaceable player. They're going to struggle to get anything like that. The trick of it is that you are losing a high-scoring local player. So you can certainly find imports who can do the job that Kosta Barbarouses does, but can you find somewhere in your team another local player who can have that amount of impact? That's tricky because local players who are that good often like good enough to be pushing for a World Cup selection. mostly not playing in the A-League, or if they are, they're trying not to be playing in the A-League. They're ready to move somewhere else. And if that's not the case, well, then maybe they're already at the Phoenix. But mostly looking back on this, I think my main thought, I the Phoenix will figure something out. That's all right. But I find this weird from Kosta Barbarouses' perspective, especially seeing Sean Gill, I think it was, did a bit of a little, like a press conference on the thing this morning after that news broke, and he said it a couple of times where it was like, so why has he left? Oh, he's thought his football would be better suited elsewhere, something along those lines, something to that effect, which is not like he left the Phoenix once before very strictly for like family reasons, so that I could have expected something like that. But the idea that he thought there was or that he thinks there is a better option than the club where he scored like 20 odd goals in the last 2 seasons and worked his way back into all white selection, having been on the outer of all white selection for a little while there. He worked his way back into all white selection, and now he's leaving that environment in the year of a World Cup. I think is super risky, especially because Kosta Barbarouses himself don't think this is true. I think this is just one of those things where athletes sometimes convince themselves of something. But he wasn't selected for the 2010 World Cup squad right at the start of his career, and he was like telling people as recently as a couple months ago, while the All Whites were trying to get back to the latest ones, like, yeah, well, the reason I didn't get picked is because I left the Wellington Phoenix, so Ricky Herbert held a grudge against me, which Ricky Herbert said wasn't true. But like, if you believe that's true, and he should have been at that World Cup, by the way, I don't know why he wasn't, but for whatever reason it was, if you believe it, like that's your perception that you missed out on a World Cup and you spent your whole career trying to get back there, and you think it was because you left the Wellington Phoenix at the wrong time, and now you're going to leave the Wellington Phoenix a year out from another World Cup. Like you're playing with fire there, because I could very easily see a situation where Barbarouses goes to another club and it doesn't quite suit the way that he operates in, and they're not going to give him the same leeway that the Phoenix would, because of the goodwill he's earned in the last 2 years of scoring a whole bunch of goals for them. Like, he had a perfect role. Didn't always play to that perfect role, as I was saying, but when it worked really well. And he's leaving that for something else. So I think that is yeah, I think that might be good news for Ben Waine and Max Mata, trying to compete for what was potentially one spot in the World Cup selection between them. Well, maybe that might be best 2 out of 3 with Kosta Barbarouses of his next landing spot, if that isn't a smooth landing wherever he ends up.
Well, if he doesn't make this World Cup squad after leaving the Phoenix, at least we will know for sure that it wasn't because of some grudge about him leaving the Phoenix.
Yeah, it won't be Ricky Herbert's fault this time.
We've also had we've had a football first squad, New Zealand under 20 men, and an all-white squad. I think we talked a bit about the football first squad last week. There are, as usual, lots of Wellington Phoenix and Auckland FC players in the under 20s squad. Between the under 20s and the all-white squad, are there any notable selections or players you've been thinking about as just notable headline acts?
I think the one that stands out the most in the under 20s, it is a nice little, I wrote about it a bit, I think on Friday, it's a nice selection of like some of the best players in the Phoenix Academy. A lot of them have been close to the first team. Some of the best players in the Auckland FC, you actually get like a good chunk from both of those clubs, which is maybe the first time at youth level where that's been the case, although we've had it with the All Whites for a little while, where there's a good chunk of Auckland and Wellington players. 1 or 2 overseas-based players, not a lot, but a couple of new ones as well there. But I think the most interesting angle on the under 20s is that Luke Brooks-Smith is there, because Luke Brooks-Smith is also eligible for the under 17 World Cup that's happening later this year, and maybe he won't go to that. Like, maybe they'll just decide you're past that, and it'll be during the A-League season, I think. So he might just be he might not be released. At the same time, they might decide, well, actually, that's a pretty good opportunity, you know, and you're going to be maybe one of the best players there. You already went to one under 17 World Cup, and you're still young enough to be able to go to another one. it's not a long list of players who have gone to under 17 and under 20 World Cups in the same year. It's pretty hard to do. Most recently, the not the last cycle, but the cycle before that, and the women's side, we did get Millie Clegg and Ruby Nathan both did it. Millie Clegg was scoring goals at both of those World Cups. That's how amazing she was doing at that point. Ruby Nathan, don't think really played other than a few minutes maybe off the bench in the under 20s, but she was in that squad, so she's also, deserves the same recognition for being selected to both. Millie Clegg, of course, then also got selected to a senior World Cup squad within 12 months of that happening. Didn't play at that World Cup, but was in the wider squad, so she was picked for all three of them in a quick hurry. And there is a senior World Cup squad coming next year. I don't think that's soon enough for Luke Brooks-Smith to be able to do the three-peat the same as Millie Clegg, but there is a chance he might do the double up. There's definitely a chance he could go to the he's by getting selected for the under 20 for this touring squad that they've got, which is going to Chile, which is who they're the hosts of the under 20 World Cup, so they're going and playing the host in a couple of games a few months early, get a little bit of acclimatization sorted. By getting selected in that squad, that's already proof that he's on the radar. And we know he's one of the best under-17s players. And he has a professional contract with the Wellington Phoenix, so it's not impossible, especially at the Phoenix, where he's going to be getting some minutes because he already did last season. He'll be playing more than that this season. It's not impossible. He might even he might have a crack at that Senior World Cup. I think that's very unlikely because I'm pretty sure Darren Bazley's quite sorted on what his squad is going to look like, and it would take injuries or drastic drops of form for anything to change. Outside of maybe one or two spots that are up for grabs. That last striker is one of them. The third goalkeeper is another one. Maybe a bit of backup right back too could be something. But yeah, I'm very much hoping for the Luke Brooks-Smith experience to go that way. Let's see him at the under 17s. Let's see him at the under 20s. Why not?
You did mention the players in the under 20 squad from overseas clubs. I'll just list them here. James Bull Kelly, he's with FC Dallas. Harry Cassie is with Western United. Luca Coveney is with Western United as well. Noah DuPont is with West Bromwich Albion. Henry Gray, Ipswich Town. Keegan Kelly, University of Denver. Troy Putt, Minnesota United. And then Stipe Jukic, NK Istra, 1961. And Joseph Wallace is also with West Bromwich Albion. We also, last football thing here, we had the epic achievement of New Zealand's leading striker. Chris Wood is definitely going to the World Cup if he's fit and available. He doesn't have to worry about any grudges held or his form heading into the World Cup. He'll be there. And he may lead all players at the World Cup for offsides. Because Chris Wood this season, he has won your prestigious Golden Flag Award for the most offsides in the Premier League. Third time in his career. So let's light one up, pour some out, celebrate for Chris Wood and his offside exploits, which are far more interesting, far more exciting, far bigger achievement than whatever Nottingham Forest are doing. But what have Nottingham Forest been doing?
Well, they did kind of run out of gas towards the end of the season, which is to be expected for a team that's not used to playing all the way to the end like that. They've only been a couple years back in the Premier League. Dropped a few too many points along the way, but they won last week against West Ham, which put them in a position where if they could beat Chelsea in the final game of the season and get one of two other results go their way, which was, I think they needed Aston Villa to drop points against Manchester United, and they needed Newcastle United to drop points, or they needed Newcastle United to drop points against Everton, which, it only had to be one of those two other results to go their way, but they did also need to beat Chelsea. As it happens, Villa lost and Newcastle lost, so both of those results went exactly the way they wanted them, but Nottingham Forest also lost. They went down 1-0 to Chelsea, so They were 2 points short of qualifying for Champions League. Instead, they end up in seventh place. But because England has some good coefficients, seventh place will still get them some European football next season, which was already guaranteed going into the final round. They knew worst case scenario, they'd be playing Europa Conference League, so the third tier competition. They'd be playing Conference League qualifiers. When I say qualifiers, I think they enter in the playoff round. So it's the last round before the group phase, the league phase, whatever they call it these days, which they will probably be seeded for, and so will probably, you know, they should be favored to advance, but they will have to still get something out of that. But I think crucially that those games it'll be a two-legged game playoff, but crucially that will be in more like August kind of range. So as the Premier League season is getting underway, not like some of those teams who start in like the first round of European qualifying and you got to start playing games in like July and it messes up your whole preseason. So Forest won't have that issue, which is good because we want a good long sturdy preseason for Forest as they hope, well, to give Tyler Bindon and Marko Stamenic as much room as possible to try and press and maybe stick around and be a part of that Europa Conference League campaign. There is an angle maybe that works out better for them because in the Champions League you'd feel more pressure and probably also have a little bit more financial room to go out and sign maybe more proven players, whereas Conference League it's a bit more you can get away with playing a few more youngster guys there, so that might leave the door slightly ajar for Bindon and Stamenic, hopefully, but certainly it'll be an opportunity for Chris Wood to go play in some European football, which he's only ever done, I think, twice in his career. There was once with Burnley where they didn't get through Europa qualifiers, but they did have some qualifiers. They got there by virtue of like they had the best fair play record in Europe or something, and back then they were giving out an extra spot for that for some reason. So he had one stint there with Burnley. And he also on loan at Birmingham, on loan at Birmingham earlier on in his career, quite early on in his career. It was sort of one of his first big breaks, actually. He played a little bit of what is now Europa League, but I think back then it might have still been called the UEFA Cup. So he's had a little bit of experience in Europe. That might be the one aspect where Marko Stamenic can come in and give him some tips, because Marko Stamenic has already played in the Champions League for two different clubs, plus in the Europa League this past season. So he's actually got more experience in UEFA competition than Wizzy does. But yeah, hopefully they'll get to line up together next season in the Conference League, the mighty Conference League, which they actually, like, because it's not the Champions League, Forest would have a chance to do quite well in that. You know, they could potentially go fairly deep in that, which would be fun as well.